Awareness, the final frontier. These are the explorations of Jonathan Robinson and Brian Tom O'Connor. Their continuing mission, to discover fresh new paths to the mystery within, to seek out new joys and new methods of awakening, to boldly go into the heart of expanded consciousness. This is Awareness Explorers.
Well, welcome once again, Awareness Explorers, for another launch into cosmic conundrums. I am Jonathan Robinson, and I'm here with my co-host,
Brian Tom O'Connor.
I was hoping you would fill that in, Brian. Good to have you, because you're the guy I'm interviewing today. Just like last time you interviewed me about my spiritual past and what I've found particularly effective in awakening, and today I get to interrogate you, and I'm looking forward to it, because the way this all started, as some of our listeners know, is I came across your book Awareness Games, which was like finding, kind of like winning the lottery in the consciousness field, because I've always been looking for very simple, easy methods for awakening. And you know, in a normal spiritual book, you'll get one method, two methods maybe. And in your book, you get 80 for $8, I think, which was the best deal I think I've ever gotten. I was ecstatic for days just reading it. And then we started conversations, and it led to this podcast. And I know something about your background, but not a lot. So I want to begin by just telling our listeners the basics. You're how old?
That is a cosmic conundrum.
Yes.
Let's say I've become a senior citizen just recently.
Congratulations. And though the other part of you is ageless, so it's kind of a little bit of two different worlds. And you were in the corporate world for a long time, and at the same time very much in the theater world. What was that like?
Oh, that's right. Yes, I've been involved in theater all my life, as a matter of fact, ever since probably fourth grade. But I subsidized my theater work in the business world, doing mostly computer-related jobs. So even though I often worked professionally as an actor and a director, it's tough in New York to really make a living doing that. So I always had a really great day job that was flexible and allowed me to pursue that. And my mother was an actress, so growing up we were always, hanging out backstage and on Broadway and seeing her on soap operas and stuff. And my dad was in TV news, so it was a kind of a show business type family.
Mm-hmm. And how did you get into spiritual awakening and awareness with those two backgrounds?
Well, actually, thinking back on it, even though I started much later in life, when I was thinking back on it, I realized that my mother was into this in a peripheral way. She had all these books that I would find lying about that were really interesting, like Cosmic Consciousness, and there was Ken Key's book, The Handbook to Higher Consciousness. And
love that book.
Yeah, and A Course in Miracles, and Larry LeSean's How to Meditate, and even a book called The Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment.
One of my favorites.
Yeah? So I realized that I had a taste of all this at a very early age and then forgot about it.
Uh-huh.
And starting probably around early teen years, I got very depressed, and that lasted, decades. And I had a really troubled time, especially in my 30s, late 20s and 30s. I was so depressed, and I was hostile and withdrawn and reclusive and not very functional, and really, really quite a mess. And but I was still doing plays and acting in them. And I remember I had just done this production of The Cherry Orchard by Chekhov, which was a particularly depressing role. And after the play was over, I was just hit by another wave of depression. And I sat down at work on some downtime, and I put into the search engine, how do people change? And that led to this whole search with a lot of dead ends and side trips and stuff that led into all sorts of things like psychological methods and magical methods, NLP, the Sedona method, and even ritual magic, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit.
Oh,
And
you have a history that way. I didn't know that.
yes,
Caught. I have it on tape now.
exactly. But of course, none of it worked. So, I didn't really continue in that. And then I was reading a book about codependency, and it said if anyone really wanted to become psychologically healthy, they really had to develop a spiritual side. So off I went back to Google and searched how to do that. And that led me to, oddly enough, binaural beats, which is kind of a brain entrainment thing.
Hmm.
And it was on that website where they had a reading list. And there was a book by Ramana Maharshi and a book by Nisargadatta Maharaj, great Indian sages of the mid-20th century, whose method, self-inquiry, pointed your attention back to who was experiencing what our experience is. And this was the big breakthrough for me when I
Hmm.
started looking at awareness itself. I started to realize the happiness that I had been searching for all along. But the ironic part was that in order to really get in touch with this happiness that's in the background of experience in awareness, I had to completely accept myself the way I was and stop trying to fix myself, so that the
Uh-huh.
search that I started with, which was how do people change, was something that I didn't end up with because I stopped trying to change.
Right, right. Sounds like your story is something that a lot of people go through where they hit bottom and then they go on some kind of search, floundering search, trying anything. And you went through psychological stuff, you went through various modalities, and you finally, by trying a bunch of stuff, you found something that worked for you.
That's right.
Yeah. I think that's almost, you're a cliche, Brian.
I never thought of
I,
myself as
I
that way,
hate
but
to mention that, but that seems to be the way people do it. I know it was kind of similar for me in hitting bottom as a teenager and, tried lots of drugs, lots of different methods, and TM, the whole thing. So you finally found this stuff that you liked with inquiry. What I'm wondering is how that started to impact your world of corporate stuff and theater stuff, and how those three things, I guess, affected each other.
right. Well, I always had a good time doing theater, and I was always happiest when I was being creative. And I did both directing and acting and singing in cabaret. I was less happy at the corporate job, but that was funding all my artistic endeavors. And after finding these awareness practices, um, which, by the way, were based on more modern teachers. I mean, after finding these old, the 20th century Indian sages, I found a lot of people who are contemporary who are teaching this thing. And
Like
uh,
who?
well, I started with Pamela Wilson. That was the first one I ever went to.
Hmm.
Um, she started out teaching Sedona method and then became a student of Robert Adams, who actually studied with Ramana Maharshi in India.
Hmm.
And she had an awakening with Neelam, who was who studied with Papaji, a later Indian guru who also studied with Ramana Maharshi. And then I found Stuart Schwartz, who was based in Sedona at the time, but came to New York a lot, and so I went on retreats with him and one-on-ones and studied quite a bit. Then I discovered Adyashanti, and although I had not met him, I only read his books and listened to his recordings. One of his students he asked to teach, named Locke Kelly, and he was based in New York, so I started working with Locke one-on-one for a long time, and that was a big influence on me. So that was a little bit of a digression from your original question, which was how did it affect my life? And I remember in the corporate world, I would have a lot of anxiety when any of the higher up executives would have dealings with me. I was in the software department, and I tested and wrote requirements for software. And I remember there was one executive who had a reputation for being extremely mean and extremely harsh and challenging and difficult to talk to. And I was totally afraid of her. And one day there was a problem with the software, and she was in a meeting, and she called me into the meeting. And I said, uh-oh, okay, I'm just going to go into this meeting, and I'm going to ask myself, what is the awareness in which all of this is appearing? And I walked in, and she said, we're having this problem. Can you explain it to me? And the words just fell out of my mouth. I just explained in a very simple, calm way that this was the problem, that we understood it was the problem, that we we're going to fix it. Here's what we're going to do to fix it. And this is how long it would take. And she said, okay, thanks.
Uh-huh.
And I walked out. And you know, it was just like, it was almost like magic. I mean, I'm not really big on magical thinking, but I tell you, when you shift your attention to the awareness, things turn out better in some mysterious way.
Yeah, I think you're kind of plugging into the universe,
Yeah.
and on some level, and therefore you're more in alignment with vibrations that go well than vibrations that would get you triggered and upset, and things do tend to go better.
That's right.
So you were discovering all these different teachers and still doing the corporate and still doing the theater. And what led me to you originally was your book, Awareness Games, of which you come up with all these creative, very creative ones that I'd never even heard of, methods for quickly awakening. I'm wondering how those came about.
Well, it was kind of a twofold thing. Certainly, the teachers that I mentioned before often focused on awareness. As a matter of fact, the one time that I had seen Adyashanti in person, when he made an appearance in New York, he said people often ask him how he would boil down his teaching, and he said one word, awareness, and that made me realize I was on the right track. And so I would sit and do their practices, which is, as I said before, turning attention to awareness itself, from the content of awareness to the background of awareness. But their methods were, each teacher would have one particular method, or maybe two or three, that they really liked. And back to theater, I was very influenced at an early age by something called theater games, because my mother used to teach them. She also did a lot of work with students. And theater games were improvisations for the theater, pioneered by a woman from the Second City troupe in Chicago called Viola Spolin. And you brought these games into rehearsals while you were working on the play. And they were games where you would play with the who, what, where, and why of the situation and play with the other characters. And they were a lot of fun, and I loved doing those improvs. And then one day it hit me that I bet you I could combine the fun of theater games with the explorations of awareness that I was trying out in my meditations. And so I would sit in meditation, and these ideas would just pop into my head. So when I was done with a meditation, I would write them down. And the next day I would do another meditation and I would try it. And because I wasn't so fixed on doing it exactly the way the teacher told me to do, I would modify them to see what worked for myself.
Hmm.
What was actually bringing about this kind of happy for no reason feeling. And so I just came up with a bunch of games and I would write them down, and actually over a course of probably 3 years. And it wasn't until I left the corporate world that I decided to put them into a book.
It's brilliant, and I'm benefiting from that, and this podcast is, and so is our listeners. So, it's interesting. A lot of my best ideas have come from basically meditating, getting a very quiet mind, and then asking, how can I be of service? Several of my book ideas came from that. And people don't talk about that much, but that's another way of plugging in. You plug in through awareness, you plug in through meditating and asking the right question, or our background often gives us an impetus to figure out a way to take our gifts and create something beneficial in the world.
You're absolutely right. And I'm a big appreciator of human creativity in all fields, in the arts, sciences, and even in business. And I really believe that creativity comes from the universal consciousness through the individual, using the individual's particular talents and personality and
Mm-hmm.
abilities, and then comes out into the world that way. So it's really almost mysterious when you get an inspiration. It just pops into your head. I didn't plan that. I didn't sort of intend to think of that, although I may have asked to solve a particular problem or hoped to achieve a particular goal. But I think this is true of all creative people, that the creation really comes from the universe. And as a matter of fact, what I came to realize is that the eye that's looking out my eyes is actually identical with the eye that's looking out of everyone else's eyes, because it's pure. It has no qualities of its own. It totally allows everything. And if you take that one step further, it seems to me that that eye is the same eye, that there's only one looking out through billions of eyes.
Yeah, as Ram Dass says, there's only one of us here in drag.
Right, I love that quote.
Yeah.
But the distinction that I make is that you don't actually have to believe that's true metaphysically or philosophically. All you have to do is look inside and say, what if? What if this were true? What if the universe is looking out through my eyes? Or what if everything is appearing in consciousness and it redirects your mind back to the source? And then you turn around once more and you look out from there.
Yeah, that's an awareness game.
Yep.
Yeah.
In fact, that's the proto-awareness game.
Yeah, yeah. Do you meditate nowadays? And if you do, what do you do?
I do. I particularly like guided meditations. Rupert Spira, whom I studied with remotely, not one-on-one, but through a meetup group where we watch his videos every week, has a lot of really great guided meditations. Adyashanti has wonderful guided meditations. I enjoy listening to them a lot. But every once in a while, I just sit down by myself and say, well, how long can I just keep attention on what's happening right now without thinking about the past or thinking about the future? So that's a little bit of a game in and of itself, and I often do that. But speaking of meditation, I'm not a very good meditator. I'm not a very disciplined person. I've tried many, many times to say, okay, at 9:30 every day, I'm going to meditate for a half hour, 40 minutes. And it doesn't happen. And it's not going to happen. I'm not that type of person.
Yeah.
And the beauty part is you don't have to be. That's what I discovered.
Yeah.
Like, Locke Kelly, one of the most influential phrases he ever said to me was small glimpses many times a day. You can just drop right now and look at awareness itself and look at the world from awareness and let go of trying to fix yourself or trying to change anything or trying to not have the emotion you're having now or trying to bring about some emotion that you want. Just whatever is happening right now, you allow it, you accept it, and you turn your attention to awareness. And you can do it in 5 seconds.
Yeah.
If you do it often enough and you have practice and experience, you can do it in 5 seconds. The first few times it takes a little longer.
Yeah. And the other thing with meditation that can be problematic is you end up with a compartment where you are focusing on spirituality and awareness, but it's separate from your actual life. And doing short glimpse practices throughout the day helps to bring awareness to parts of ourselves that we need to see, because there are shadow parts. And if you bring awareness into your day, you start to see, oh, well, that doesn't work, or, why'd I say that, or whatever it is. And that's why I think glimpse practices, such as we teach in this podcast, are actually more effective than separating yourself. Although I meditate every day, 'cause I really enjoy it. But I think that ultimately, even meditation is to help us bring awareness into daily life.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And the beauty part is because you can do it in many places, at many times, in many situations, it can more integrate with daily life.
Yeah. And also, speaking of the guided meditations, there's this great resource I found of guided meditations at this website called awarenessexplorers.com. And you've been kind enough, I really appreciate putting up all our guided meditations on the website under meditations. And I don't know, there's something like 30 of them now. And I have not been a guided meditation person historically, but now you got me addicted to that. And these little guided meditations that we do make it so easy to get into awareness and so easy to just relax into beingness that's become a favorite go-to of mine. I never thought that would be the case, but I'm almost embarrassed to admit it.
Well, I'm glad to hear it.
I really appreciate you putting them up there all in one easy spot. You mentioned that you also do these meetups, which I found interesting because, I had a spiritual teacher for a lot of years, and yet you kind of have had almost like a video teacher or lots of video teachers through the years.
Yeah.
And a little bit of a sangha around these videos. Can you say a little bit about that? That's new to me.
Well, the meetup for Rupert Spira that we go to, it's in an apartment. Walter and Patricia are our gracious hosts, and every week we get together in their living room, and for the first half we watch guided meditations from Rupert's retreats. Then we take a break and we watch the question and answer from the same retreat. And we usually start at the beginning of a week-long retreat and work our way through it over several weeks. And it's so lovely, and I've been going for 3 or 4 years now, and even though there are new people and the people change, there's a kind of a core of people that you see every week. And then we started seeing each other outside of the meetups and going to see each other's work, if they're artists or concerts or just going out to dinner or walks in the park together. And I find that community of like-minded people to be really, really wonderful. And I also do a meetup myself, an awareness games meetup, where we get together and I just pick 5 games from the book that day and lead people through it and then hear about their experiences. Because often different people will respond differently to them. And it's fascinating because people do what I did. They will take an awareness game and then they will say, yes, but it wasn't quite working that way, so here's what I did. And they
Mm.
modified it for themselves. And I totally encourage that because you're really your own expert.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I haven't done that. I've taken your games as being the oracle, and I shouldn't screw with them. But I like the idea of throwing a little bit of creativity, a little bit of what I have learned works for me, and play with them.
Yeah,
After all, they are
absolutely.
games.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And it is that playful attitude that sort of separates it from certain kinds of meditation where you are really seriously trying to do it correctly and exactly as your teacher said. And that's really good for certain people and not so good for others.
Yeah, yeah. One last question before we do a guided meditation. What how many times a day do you do these games and for how long and what mode or what brings it up for you? How does the rubber meet the road?
Well, usually I try and do something in the morning uh, to set my day going. But I used to have, I used to set up certain reminders to do it, like when I'm walking down a long hallway, which happens so often I worked in an office building and I live in an apartment building and I live in New York and you're always walking down hallways or when you walk into a bookstore or something. But more important than that is when you're feeling some so-called negative feeling or anything that you don't want to feel. At any time, if that happens, you pause and you ask, what's noticing this feeling? What is this feeling appearing in? What is the me that's experiencing this? And you're just asking these questions simply to turn your attention around to awareness itself. So really, when you get into the habit of doing that anytime anything happens that you don't want to be happening, you'll
Which is
really
only about 40,000 times a day.
exactly. So it gives you a lot of
A lot
practice.
of opportunities. Yeah.
And then you start doing it when you feel good.
Uh-huh.
Like, oh, I'm really enjoying this music. Let's see if, I can experience this from awareness.
Yeah.
And it starts to pervade and color and flavor your whole life.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And it doesn't need to be a long thing. It could be 2 seconds, 20 seconds. It depends on the situation.
That's right. If you start out by just looking at the I, that's what I did way back when, and I used to spend long times doing it. But over the years, the amount of time you needed, the amount of time I needed to pop into awareness itself, to identify with awareness, gets shorter and shorter and shorter. So
Hmm.
with practice, you can just do it like that. Oh, ha, there it is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, some of our listeners probably are on the beginning side of that spectrum. And a couple things you said I know have really helped me. One is to surround yourself with people who are into this. So, tell people about the podcast, try to find friends who are into it. Um, the other thing is we offer awakening coaching, and people can go to awarenessexplorers.com, and there's a piece in the navigation bar called Awakening Coaching, and you can find out information and email us about that. I really enjoy doing that because it's kind of like being a pusher without the drugs. You're trying to you're showing people how to get high by doing certain games, and I find that like with anything, a tennis coach or whatever, that you can learn a lot more quickly if somebody is coaching you. That's why I had a spiritual teacher. You had a kind of a therapist teacher, and I think it's a very underutilized method that is very effective. So I hope people will check that out. And of course, if people want, they can donate to Awareness Explorers. And we also have this meditation section of the website, which we have put all our meditations in one spot and have fun with that, because that's kind of like Disneyland, but all the rides are on the inside.
That's great. And also, you can go to YouTube and search for meditations from Awareness Explorers and find them all there as well. So they're both on our website or on YouTube. And the page for the coaching is called Awareness Coaching on the
Awareness coaching.
website.
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
So our mission is to try to surround you with awareness, so it'll be easier for you to succumb to awareness than get lost in stuff.
Yeah.
We'll see how that goes. Anyways, I hear you have a guided meditation for us.
Yes, actually, I do. And even though we've been talking about small glimpses, this one is a little bit of a longer meditation just to fit with the format of our show here. And it's called Window to Eternity. So we begin, as in all of these meditations, by just taking a couple slow, easy, deep breaths and relaxing. Imagine that you're looking through a very small hole, like a peephole in a wall, or a very small window looking into a construction site from the sidewalk. You're on one side of the hole, and everything that you're seeing is on the other side of the hole. Now imagine that this very small peephole starts to expand and gets a little bit larger. At first you notice that as the hole gets larger, more and more of what can be seen comes into view. The hole is expanding, and now it's the size of your head, and you can see more of what's on the other side of the hole. And now the hole is expanding more, and it's the size of your whole upper body. You can see huge vistas beyond the hole in all directions. And now the hole expands to the length and width of your entire body. You can see really far in almost every direction through the hole. Now imagine that as the hole continues to expand even more, the hole moves toward you so that it now surrounds your body on all sides, not just in front of your body. And now the hole expands and moves closer so that your entire body is part of the view that can be seen through this hole. As the hole continues to expand, it becomes a three-dimensional ring or circle or globe that includes everything that can be seen in any direction, forward, backward, up or down, and includes your body. So you are the view. You are the whole itself. You can see your body and everything that surrounds it within the view of this ever-expanding, sphere-like whole. And now imagine that the whole expands even more and begins to include the landscape very far in every direction, as far as the eye can see, and all the while still includes your body in the view. And now imagine as the whole gets even bigger and bigger, You are actually becoming this spherical space that sees everything, including yourself, and that it now encompasses and surrounds the entire world, including yourself, in the view. Now imagine that as it expands and expands and includes the entire solar system, it continues to expand and expand until it includes the entire galaxy. The entire universe. Become the entire universe, seeing everything in its view, including you. Now stop imagining anything and just allow yourself to sink back into the source of your experience, the you that includes everything. And simply be that all-inclusive, universal you, the I in which everything appears. And when you're ready, at your own pace, slowly open your eyes.
Wonderful. I actually did part of that with my eyes open and kind of looking through my glasses as the whole, because that's a natural helper. You know, I imagine like I'm looking through almost binoculars into this three-dimensional world, and I am behind the glasses as just awareness. And that has worked for me in the past, and I like it because in a way it's more accurate than our normal way of looking at things.
Mm. And that's a perfect example of taking one of our awareness games or meditations or methods and modifying it to what works for you.
Yeah. So if you wear glasses, as Jesus said, blessed are the people who wear glasses, for they shall inherit awareness. That is what he said, right?
Yes, right. Chapter 20, verse 20.
Yeah, right.
His 2020 vision.
Exactly. Well, it's good to have some fun with this too, because lightness is closer to awareness than heaviness and self-criticism and all the things that sometimes we all fall into.
You said it.
Well, thank you, fellow explorers. Feel free to contact us with questions, comments, reviews, and more important than anything else, keep exploring.
Keep exploring. Thank you for listening to Awareness Explorers. To learn more, you can check out our website at awarenessexplorers.com. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or your favorite podcast app. And we'd love it if you would post a review. And please share our link on Facebook and with family and friends, because knowing yourself as awareness is the greatest gift you can give yourself or someone you love.